Bonjour, je m'appelle David Ball. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'd like to thank Chantal for the invitation and the organisers for the lovely organisation and Mr. Mutchler for the introduction. I'm not a tree person myself, but don't misunderstand me, because actually I love trees and I always have and I always will. But I say that because I actually work in risk management, and I work generally, and wherever there's a hazard, and we're always surrounded by hazards, I might work on that hazard. Or it might be a hazardous activity, like playing soccer or something like that. I might work on that and understand it from the point of view of managing risk. So that's my background. It's risk management, and I've been lucky to work in many different aspects, and so I can introduce to you some of the things which have happened in other fields, which actually parallel what's going on in this world of ALLÉES-AVENUES and the Vision Zero approaches. It's very similar to what's happening elsewhere. Now I'm sharing with Jean-Pascal today, and that's a very fine thing, because we come from very different backgrounds and we may have very different points of view. So it will be of interest to you to notice to what extent there will be sparks, or maybe there'll be a rapprochement. Who knows? We will find out. So Jean is going to speak after me. We decided that I would bat first, and those of you who play cricket will understand the significance of that. Others will not. So my first slide shows you a picture here of Britain's favourite tree. This was voted our favourite tree a couple of years ago. About a month ago, some idiot went there with a chainsaw in the night and cut it down. So the tree is no longer. And England went into mourning. It was in all the newspapers on the front page, and people were very, very upset. There is no silver lining to this cloud, except for one little thing, which shows that English people are not only concerned about the quality of roast beef. So, I will move on then. The big question which this conference is addressing is this challenge between forgiving roads and the preservation of les allées. Now, I think Will Shakespeare and Hamlet had already spotted this issue, because, as you know, Hamlet said, to chop or not to chop, that is the question. And this question always comes up in risk management, because when you're trying to manage some risk, whether it's from some hazard or some activity, the first thing you will do is a risk assessment. And you may find that there is some risk to human health or whatever from this activity or this object. But you then have this question of what are you going to do about it? You have to make a decision. And that's what we're faced with here, with this contest between forgiving roads and les allées. You must make a decision. So I'll show you an example. There it is. Now, only 15 days ago, I was in a meeting in Cheshire in England with a lot of engineers and people from the local authority. There's a very contentious issue, because this pond is quite a big pond, has been there for 270 years, and there has never been a problem with it. However, the pond is on a gently sloping hill, like that, and it's got an earth dam around the end, which keeps the water in place. It is possible that that earth dam could be overtopped. if there was a lot of rain, a huge amount of rain. It's never happened in 270 years, but it's conceivable. If it flows over the top, it could erode the dam, and all the water will slosh down the valley, and 8 kilometres down the valley, there are some houses with people in. Now, this pond has been reclassified as a reservoir in the last few years. And that brings in the reservoir engineers. And they look at it and they say, we've got to do something about this pond because it poses a risk to life. This water could engulf that community down there, and they've got a computer model. And I don't know who wrote it, and no one's tested it or anything, but the model says 1 person will die if that dam is breached. 1 person. Therefore, we must do something about it. And curiously, it involves cutting down all the trees and raising and levelling the dam. So they want to do that. So when challenged in the meeting about this, because the local people don't want to lose their trees, which they've enjoyed and continue to enjoy for all these decades, they say, we have to do it because the legislation says if it poses a risk to life, we must act. So that's their justification. But the question is, what do you mean by there is a risk? Because everything you do in life is risky. Getting out of bed every day, you face a sea of risks throughout the whole day, and your brain is helping you negotiate them. Even if you stay in bed, that's bad. That's probably the biggest risk of all because your body deteriorates. So there's no escape from being in a risky world. And most of the time, these risks are so small that we don't care about them and we don't feel the need to do anything about it. But for the engineers, the dam engineers, this is not the question. There is a risk, or at least our computer model says there's a risk, so we've got to do something, and we're going to cut the trees down. So that's what they wanted to do. So, from that you can see that there are different approaches to how people make decisions about whether a risk needs to have something done about it or not. And I've summarized 3 approaches here to decision making. Approach 1, follow an established protocol. That's basically what these engineers are doing. They've got legislation which says if there's a risk, you've got to do something. So now, the type of decision which they're making really depends on who wrote the protocol and the details of it. And some protocols are very risk averse. Approach 2 here is very common, certainly in the United Kingdom and probably here too. It's that someone, when they've identified a hazard and said, oh, it's got a risk associated with it, then their aim is to eliminate it, or at least minimize it. This is quite a common approach. And it's what I would call a non-compensatory approach. And this is quite a good term to be familiar with. Non-compensatory basically means that I'm not going to consider any other factors. My concern is this, and this is what I'm going for. Doesn't matter what other things happen. If I implement these safety measures or whatever, it doesn't matter. I've got to reduce the risk. A third approach is called compensatory decision making, and I'm going to give you an example in a minute of children's playgrounds where this has come into play. This is a situation where you accept risks, not because they're trivial, very small, but because the thing that's risky or the activity which is risky has lots of useful benefits associated with it, and you allow those benefits to compensate for the risk. Like a game of rugby is clearly a very dangerous activity because people are carried off the pitch every time you watch the game on stretchers and things like that. It's clearly dangerous, but we accept it because it's a lot of fun and people have a lot of good physical exercise and so on, and it's a great spectacle. So there are those approaches to decision making. So just to summarize, non-compensatory decisions, it's very simple. Only one attribute of a decision is considered, and the solution which maximizes that attribute is chosen. For example, even though this cheese, and last night it was magnificent, I will not buy it because it's too expensive. Or a compensatory decision, all attributes of interest are thought about. Positive ones can compensate for negative ones. So, for example, even though this wine is expensive, I'm going to buy it because it's so good. That's a compensatory decision. This is the kind of decision that we make most of the time in life, and not the other one. The non-compensatory is a bit of an odd situation. So I'll give you another example now. What's that mean? 3 minutes? 1, 2, 3. Trois. Boom. Okay, so playgrounds. I've been involved with playgrounds and playground safety for over 30 years, actually, and there's been a raging debate there because if we look at the right-hand playground, you can see what it's got. It's got a very tiny piece of equipment, less than 1 meter high. It's got a rubber surface, and it's got a fence around it. If you ask designers why it has a fence, they will give you different answers. I'm not really sure, but it's something to do with children might run off and attack somebody or what, I don't know. But it's got a fence. So this is the dream of the safety expert. Risk is minimized. That's the purpose of that playground. Minimize risk, no accidents, no liability. Also, you'll notice no tree within 200 meters. Again, every tree poses a threat. The branch can drop. It's always possible. So that's a risk, and we got rid of the trees. So that playground is absolutely fine from the non-compensatory decision-making approach, which is trying to maximize safety. On the other hand, the left-hand playground is a nightmare for those people who think that way. It's got loads of hazardous things in there, hill, high equipment, rickety bridges, all kinds of stuff in which children can get stuck and hurt themselves. And this is the new type of playground because we have multiple people, researchers now, who are working on child development. And they say that children really need exposure to risk and exciting experience, otherwise they're not going to develop. So, I mean, this argument is similar to the one we face with Les ALLÉES. So a recent development, this year, 2023, a new international standard was passed, ISO 4980. I was the British delegate on this working group which wrote this standard, and it says basically it's about sport and recreation, but that could include walking down Les ALLÉES or driving down it to enjoy it. It says that when you're dealing with hazards that the public are exposed to, the public interest is paramount, and that can include social, physical, and psychological health. And so we must consider those things when we're making these decisions about how to manage hazards such as those posed by Les ALLÉES. And so the conclusion is, in public life, safety is important, but other things are valued too, and we need to recognize that. And lastly, that instead of just using risk assessment to address things like les ALLÉES, we should be using benefit risk assessment, which is what everybody was saying yesterday, basically, that the benefits of les ALLÉES are immense, come in many, many different forms. And if we take those into account, we may consider that these tree-lined roads should be preserved. Thank you very much.